I was one of those fortunate kids who had a really good cook for a mom. And she didn't just cook a few things over and over again. And I must admit, there was really nothing she made that I didn't like. But there was one thing that always made the meal a little more delicious, a little more satisfying, a little more special. You see, I often would just be out playing until the minute the meal got served. But the times in which the meal tasted the best were really the times when I could smell it cooking for hours ahead of time. You know what I'm talking about, right? There was nothing better than a roast in the oven on a Sunday afternoon, or turkey simmering for hours and just permeating the whole house. When I could smell the food ahead of time, I wanted it more than ever. And it even seemed to taste a little better. Our desires and appetites are powerful things. I don't have to tell you that. Many of them keep us alive, and yet some can get us into trouble if we're not careful. And the stronger the desire, the more satisfying and meaningful it can be when it is finally satisfied. And often, it's the strongest desire that wins out in a given situation. Many of us forego all sorts of foods if our desire to be healthier is the stronger appetite of the two. And many of us resist cheating others because our desire to be a good person means more to us. In other words, so much depends on both knowing what is most important and desiring it too. From our gospel this third Sunday of Easter, we hear, were not our hearts burning within us? Those 7 words say so much, and yet it still has the power to move us. We see the resurrected Jesus walking along the road with 2 of his disciples. They don't recognize him for reasons that aren't entirely clear. But by the end of their journey, their eyes were opened and they recognized Jesus in their midst. One thing seems fairly clear. Without that burning in their hearts, they would never have been able to see God, who was right in front of them. God did his part. Jesus sought them out, pursued them, drew close, and walked with them on their journey. But it took 2 things on their part: faith and a sincere and strong desire for God in their hearts. In faith, we believe that our desire for God is something that is hardwired into every human person. This is how God made us. And we also believe that our desire for God is the most essential. One could argue the only one we ultimately need. The one that needs to just trump all others if we ever hope to be the people God created us to be. Every other need pales in comparison to this one need. And yet, we know that often other needs wind up taking precedence. Other needs often get the most of our attention and effort. In the moment, other needs can sometimes even seem a little more important. And so the desire for God gets sort of pushed into the background and put on the back burner somewhere. And we suffer because of it. Others suffer because of it. And so maybe today is all about trying to rekindle our passion for God, rekindle our thirst to be united with the one who is life, rekindle a fire within us to want to choose God before everything else. My guess is that a burning for God was what all those early disciples of Jesus had in common. Otherwise, they never could have dropped everything to follow him. And maybe that's why God chose them in the first place. They were thirsting for more, and Jesus provided them with living water. It's not enough that our loving God wants us to recognize him, wants us to see his presence and action in the world, recognize him in every human face. We have to want it too. God never forces himself on us. And the increasing of our appetite for God will not come about exactly the same for each of us. But it will involve taking the time to just be, just rest, just ask the right questions. Just keep wondering what this crazy thing called life is all about. Desire is one of the keys to a life of faith. Desire is what keeps important things too of our feet just moving along the right path. Keeps us from getting stagnant, lazy, or complacent. Desire is what keeps us searching for the only thing worth finding. Desire is what gives God the opportunity to open our eyes, enabling us to see what we need to see.